Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to succeed at anything, or rather, how to be good at anything. Before we start, I want to say that I'm talking about how to be good at anything. I'm not saying how to be the best in the world at everything, right? I'm saying how to be good, how to succeed at anything. There's a quote by David Allen: you can have anything you want, but not everything. So I just want to get that out of the way. Yes, this can be applied to many different things, to anything that you want to be good at, but you have to know that, you won't be able to succeed at everything, and that's just a fact of life. So, how to be good at anything. I'm going to break this down into 3 parts, and this is kind of how I break down most of my general concepts, or most of my, whenever I'm trying to break down concepts, I usually break it down this way, and that is the why, what, how kind of formula. So the why, the what, and the how. So we're going to start with the why. Why do you want to do this thing, right? So throughout this video, I'm going to use music as an example. So let's say I am you and I'm watching this video and I'm thinking, okay, I want to be good at, I play drums, so I'm going to use that as an example. I want to be good at playing drums. Okay, why do you want to be good at playing drums? This is a very overlooked piece of the puzzle when people try to do things, because they don't figure out their true why for why they want to do something, and then they just start and then they aren't able to complete it because they don't have the perseverance. Because ultimately, having a why gives you perseverance. Having a why gives you perseverance, because it's like a cause and effect. The why is like the cause, and the perseverance is the effect. So if you have a reason, a why, another way to describe a why is a purpose, right? Or like a reason for doing something, the purpose of doing something. So for my example, I want to be good at playing drums. What is the purpose to being good at playing drums? Why do I want to actually do that? Basically what we're trying to find here is a powerful statement, or a powerful thing that we will achieve or not achieve if we do this thing that pushes us to do this thing, right? So this is let's say being good at playing drums is kind of like the destination, and I'll get more into that later, but this is kind of like the deeper purpose. Why do we need to, what is the true reason behind that destination, right? So there's a few ways that you can do this. One of the ways you can do this is by asking 5 whys. It could get really deep really fast. So for example, it could be I want to get good at playing drums. Okay, why do you want to get good at playing drums? Because it feels like I'm not good at anything. Okay, why does it feel like you're not good at anything? Because I haven't been able to succeed at anything. Why haven't you been able to succeed at anything? Because I haven't been perseverant and consistent with my progress. Why haven't you been consistent? You can keep going, and it can get down to a true why. So maybe you would find okay, I want to play drums because I've never been consistent in anything, and playing drums is a fun thing that I love to do, so I want to be able to be consistent at that fun thing. Finding that purpose where you can just use that as your way to keep going, so that when you start failing, because that's inevitably going to happen, when you start failing, you can use your why to get back up, right? So one thing about this is that your why, it has to be powerful. Because if you don't have a powerful why, I have done this before where I would try to do something and I would make my why and I was like, yes, this is a good why. But then when I would fail and I would go back to that why, it wouldn't push me. It wouldn't push me to be perseverant, right? So it has to be a powerful enough why. It can't just be, why do you want to play drums? Oh, because it's fun, right? You need to get to a true core of why you want to do this thing. And honestly, if it's just something that you want to do for fun, then that's completely valid. I just think that the deeper your why goes, the farther your perseverance can go. And I'm not saying that you can't succeed at something if it's just fun. That's not what I'm saying, because obviously you can still do that. But I'm saying the easier it is to keep going, the deeper your why is. So it's kind of your why and your perseverance have a directly proportional relationship. So as y goes up, as this goes up, your perseverance also goes up. The greater your why is, right? The greater, the better, whatever your why is, the longer your perseverance will last, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Have a powerful, deep why that you actually know you can be perseverant with. Another way to find your why is to think of costs and rewards. What will you lose if you don't do this thing? Or what will you gain if you do this thing, right? Thinking about costs and rewards is also another really helpful way to figure out why you actually want to do this thing and what you will get from it, or maybe even what others will get for it that you want to happen. So like I said, it has to be powerful because perseverance is a thing that a lot of people don't have when they're trying to be good at something or to succeed at something, right? So you need to be it needs to be powerful because most people stop. Most people don't have the perseverance to keep going, but your why is obviously what gives you that strong, deep perseverance to keep going. So this is a very important step, right? One thing to note is that I do think that a lot of times it can be hard to figure out what your why is before you start anything, right? So a lot of times you'll have to figure it out along the way. I also want to mention that I don't think it's impossible to do something if you don't have a why behind it. Now, maybe it is impossible because everything we do, there's a purpose behind it, right? There's a purpose behind every action we take. But I do think that if you didn't do this step, I don't think all hope would be lost. But I think if you did do this step, it would just make it a lot easier and just a lot smoother of a process, right? And like I said, sometimes you'll have to figure it out along the way and be patient with that. But all that being said, this is a really important step, right? And as I go throughout this video, I want to say that there's kind of like a analogy that I formed for this. Your why is your engine. If you think about driving a car, right? Your why is your engine. It's what keeps you going. It's what powers everything, right? So your why is your engine. Okay, so now that we have our why, or maybe we're trying to figure it out along the way, but we have an idea of why I want to do this. We have a reason, at least even like a small structure or a small scaffold for for our purpose, for why we're actually doing this thing. So now that we have our why, next we need to move on to the what. This what section in our analogy, in our little car analogy, our what is our destination. Okay, so what are you trying to achieve? When you say, I want to be good at drumming, I want to be good at whatever, what is that? Like, what do you mean you want to be good at that? In this step, we're defining success. We're defining what success looks like right now, because obviously, if we achieve this success, our success is going to keep changing, and those goalposts are going to keep moving. But you have to be defining what success looks like right now, because if you don't know what success looks like, then you don't know what you're working towards, and you're kind of just blindly working on this thing, but you don't really know where you're going, right? Know where you're going. Your what, just how our why gives us perseverance, our what gives us our destination, or at least our current destination, right? So in the car analogy, right, this is our destination. If we're at point A, we have the engine to get us to that destination, and so now we need our point B which is the destination, right? One thing I want to say is that back to this and like the engine, the deeper your why goes, that's kind of like the stronger your engine is. So the stronger your engine is, or maybe like how much gas you have, how much fuel you have, right? The stronger your engine is, or maybe the more fuel that you have, the longer you can go, right? So I wanted to clarify that because I explained it kind of weird, and I think the engine analogy makes a lot more sense. So back to our what. Our what is our destination, right? We're trying to define what success looks like right now. So let's say in my example, I'm saying I want to be good at drums. Okay, what does that look like? What is good at drums for me right now? And this could be a lot of different things. It's kind of like 3 different formats or forms that success can come in. So it's kind of like you can divide it like this, right? So you could have the identity, so like who you are becoming as a person. You could have some kind of, oh boy, I'm gonna have to draw a thing that's supposed to be like a trophy. You can have like some kind of outcome, right? Or you can have a process, so kind of like that kind of thing. So these are the three kind of formats that your destination could come in. It could either be an identity, an outcome, or a process. So in our example, it could either be, I want to become a drummer. Okay, so like a drummer that is consistently like in a band, right? And you're like playing gigs consistently, that kind of thing. Or maybe you're part of some kind of like community of drummers or something like that, right? I want to become a drummer. Outcomes is something like, let's say there's a specific skill that I want to improve in my drumming. So like I want to be able to do my singles at 200 BPM or doubles at 200 BPM, something like that, like a specific outcome. Or maybe that outcome is I want to get a drumming gig within the next month or something like that, right? And then, or the process destination could be I want to practice drums for an hour every day for 30 days. Something like that. Those are the three different kinds of destinations or outcomes or destinations that you were trying to achieve. Now, I do think that the identity and the process can be a little bit more useful, especially the process. I think when you are trying to define what success looks like for you right now, it's going to change, obviously, because as you would start to achieve more things, these are going to change. So obviously this is going to look different depending on the situation, but I also think that it's possible to use multiple of these at the same time. And depending on the day, depending on the situation, certain ones become more prominent. So it could be, maybe your destination is like three things, but they're all kind of pointing towards the same thing. So maybe it's like, I want to be a drummer in a band who's consistently playing gigs. Okay, so the current outcome, the current goal that I want is to play a gig within the next 30 days. And then maybe the process to get there is I want to spend an hour working on my skills or working on finding gigs every single day for 30 days. Something like that. You could use all of these at the same time, and I think that could make it more powerful. But if I had to choose, I think a process-based destination is a more effective, and it just helps you with figuring out what you need to work on today. Because saying I want to get a gig in 30 days is it's not very actionable, right? But if you think like I want to work on my skills or my whatever every single day, that's more actionable, right? So these are the three different types of destinations that I think can be used at the same time, or it could just be what you want to focus on right now. Because as you grow, as you improve, as you get better, your destination is going to change, right? You're going to have it's like this. It's not like you'll just have one destination. You're going to have multiple kind of checkpoints or achievements that you get along the way, right? So your destination is going to change, and depending on where you're at in your process right now, maybe if you're just starting, your goal is to just practice every day. But then as you start improve and get really good, maybe your goal is to perform at something, I hope I'm making sense. One thing to kind of make it more fun and more engaging, and this kind of goes along with the identity outcome process kind of thing. Challenge yourself. Make it relatively hard. You don't want super easy things that aren't truly making you work really hard and truly making you want to keep going, right? Because there is definitely a balance between difficulty and your abilities, right? Ideally, there's a chart. Okay, so I think this is what the graph looks like. If you are have low ability, low difficulty, then yes, you're going to make progress, but you're not going to make a ton of progress. But if you have really high difficulty and difficulty that is higher than your ability, then that's the optimal time for focus, right? If the difficulty is just slightly higher than your ability, so there's a bit of a challenge, right? But then if you're I guess this graph is kind of like the effectiveness, right? If the difficulty gets too hard, then your ability or maybe your effectiveness goes down, right? Because if it's just completely challenging, you can't do anything, then you won't be able to do anything. If it's too easy, then it's boring and you won't make that much progress. But if you have it as like it's slightly difficult, slightly more difficult than your ability or your effectiveness, then that is like prime time where you can grow, right? So you want that. You want to be able to challenge yourself. You don't want it to be too easy, but you don't want it to be too hard. You want to find a balance. One way to make, there's multiple different ways you can do this. One way to make it challenging is to put a time restriction on yourself. So do like I was saying, like get a gig in 30 days, right? That's a time restriction. Or maybe if it's like a smaller thing, maybe like complete this thing by the end of the day or something like that. It can go like these destinations, you can have like the big destinations, but you can also have like the daily destinations, right? So you can have like the big goal, right? Which I think is like one of these three things, but then your kind of your smaller blocks, right? You're breaking down, right? I should have mentioned this. You're breaking down this destination. You're breaking down your bigger destination to smaller building blocks. And within those building blocks, you can give yourself time restrictions. And within those building blocks, those will be these three different things, right? So you're going to have the bigger goals and you're going to have the smaller goals, right? And you can apply all of this to the micro and the macro, right? So another way to make something harder on yourself is to just make it a really, like an outcome that you would think would never be possible. So almost like a dream or a far outcome. Because one thing that I like about these is that if it's like a dream or like a very far outcome that you would never think would happen, is that if you don't think it would happen, then you don't expect it to happen. But if you're working towards it, then you will achieve so much more progress than you would have. Even if you don't achieve this specific outcome, you achieve so much progress because of it, right? So there's multiple different ways to challenge yourself, whether that's through a time restriction, making the destination super far out. Multiple different ways to do this, but I think these two are the ways that I really like to make it challenging, right? And these can kind of go along with this diagram because this increases the difficulty and the time restriction kind of just like squeezes this in, right? Squeezes this diagram in a little bit, makes it tighter. Like I said earlier, this is our destination. I'm just going to write that here. On our like car driving analogy, we have our engine and we have our destination. So the last piece of the puzzle, the last kind of point that I want to talk about is the how, right? The how. Why, what, how, right? The how is like actually driving the car, actually pushing the pedals, actually steering the wheel. Like this is what you are actually doing to try to use your perseverance to get to this destination, right? This is the pathway. So like I said, having a why gives you perseverance, having a what gives you a destination, and having a how gives you a plan. Having a how gives you like a plan for progress, right? So how do we execute the how, right? Really, the biggest thing that you need to be thinking about with how is consistent practice. Or you could simplify that, I guess, to consistent improvement, which I like to talk about a lot, right? Consistent practice. Consistency is like the biggest thing ever when you're trying to be good at something, right? Consistency and patience within that consistency. You need to have patience because a lot of times, sometimes things will take shorter than you think they will. Sometimes they will, sometimes they are easier than you think they are, but in the long term, it'll probably take longer than you think it will, right? You just have to be consistent, have that perseverance. That perseverance helps you be consistent, and just have that consistent practice. So in terms of consistency, you really need to have your patience. And in terms of consistent practice as a whole, you want to have a routine, a system that is designed for improvement. You want to have a routine, in other words, a system that is designed for improvement. And this is going to look differently depending on what you're doing, right? So obviously this routine is going to look differently depending on what you're trying to be good at, right? But I think there are 3 steps that every routine has, right? Every routine has these 3 steps. if it's a good routine. Every routine designed for improvement has these 3 steps, okay? So the first step is an evaluation step. An evaluation of what you're good at and what you're bad at. So for example, in my drumming, maybe every time I go sit down to practice, I evaluate, I push myself to the limits. Figure out what am I bad at? I'm challenging myself, right? I'm challenging myself to figure out what I'm bad at and what I need to work on. And like I said, this is going to look differently depending on what you're trying to be good at, what you're trying to succeed at in the long run, right? So you need to evaluate yourself. What are you good at? What are you bad at? You want to strengthen your strengths, and you want to utilize your strengths effectively in a way that if you're strong at something, then you should use it, right? If you're strong at something, then you should take advantage of that. And if you're bad at something, you want to improve at it, right? So I think an evaluation step is really important and something that I miss a lot whenever I'm trying to improve. You need this evaluation step to know, like, are you good at this thing? Are you bad at this thing? What are you good at? What are you bad at? How can you kind of just mapping out where you are, right? This is kind of like, if you think about like another kind of destination kind of thing, this is kind of like point A. This is where we're starting, right? And like I said, throughout all of this can be done in the micro and in the macro. So this could be just an overall evaluation. Before your 30 days, you're evaluating a certain characteristic. And then at the end of the 30 days, you're trying to evaluate that same characteristic and try to see if you improved at it, things like that. Or you can do this in every single day, every single practice section, every single focus session. You're trying to see, what am I good at? What do I need to work on? How am I working on this? That kind of thing, right? So that's the first step in this routine that is designed for improvement. The second step is to plan. This is the pathway to improve on these bad things and to strengthen our strengths, right? So plan out. How am I going to improve these things that I am bad at? How am I going to use my strengths to my advantage, right? And it's hard to give specific tips for this because this is obviously going to look different for every single thing. But for example, within my drumming, right? My drumming example. Let's say I'm bad at speed. I want to get faster with my hands and with my feet. But let's say hands. Just take it one thing at a time, right? Let's say I want to get faster with my hands. How am I going to get faster with my hands? I need to push myself, right? I need to push myself, challenge myself, practice a lot. A lot of this, for music especially, a lot of this just requires lots of repetition and practice. In a working out example, this requires progressive overload, and I think progressive overload is a very widely applicable concept, right? Progressive overload, just pushing yourself to your limits and slowly increasing the difficulty as you get better, right? So you're trying to find a plan for getting better, right? Or maybe utilizing your strengths to your advantage. So maybe in my drumming example, every practice session I evaluate, okay, or maybe I look at what I did last practice session and evaluate from that. What am I good at? What am I bad at, right? Or I guess I should point at this. What am I good at? What am I bad at? I take what I'm good at and maybe I use part of my practice session to work on utilizing my strengths to my advantage. So like, let's say I'm drumming and I'm playing along to the song and I'm trying to use my strengths in a unique way that's unique to me, where I can like take advantage of that, right? So take advantage of your strengths. And then maybe in a separate part of my practice session, I'm looking at what I was bad at and I'm trying to improve upon that. And this is what we're doing in our plan. We're seeing like, how can I take advantage of this? How can I improve upon this, right? So the evaluation is kind of like, okay, where am I at? What do I need to improve on? And what can I take advantage of? The planning stage is, how can I take advantage? How can I improve at this thing? And then, as you might expect, step 3 is just executing, right? Executing on your plan. This is actually, I am taking advantage. I am improving right now. And this is like point B, right? This is where we're at now when we evaluate. This is how we're going to get to point B. And this is getting to point B, right? Executing on our plan, executing on what we know we need to execute on, right? And this just like a lot of execution, like I said, this just takes patience and practice and time and all of those things, right? Because like I said, a lot of times it'll take longer than you think. You need to be consistent. You need to be intentional. Oh my goodness. Being intentional. This is really what I should have wrote here. you have to be intentional. It has to be intentional execution. If you have a plan and you know what you need to work on, you have to be intentional with improving that thing or with utilizing that skill effectively, right? If you just take a lot of reps, practice a lot, patience a lot, but you're not actually being intentional and you're not actually trying to improve, you're not actually trying to take advantage of what you know you can take advantage of, then you're not going to improve as much as you would if you're just intentional, slow, just intentional with how you are practicing, intentional with what you are doing, actually trying to get better, actually trying to improve, right? So this is kind of the 3-step process that I think every routine or system that you need designed for improvement, right? So every practice session, every focus session, every time you work on this thing you're trying to succeed at, you want to evaluate, you want to plan, and you need to execute. And like I said, this can be in the micro and in the macro. The last thing that I want to say about trying to have consistent practice is that one way to make this evaluation process and just make this whole entire process and routine and system easier and just more effective and motivational and all of that is to track your progress. Track your progress somehow. It doesn't necessarily have to be with numbers, right? It doesn't have to be with like data. Well, it is data. Okay, we're talking about data here, but it doesn't have to be numbers. It could be visual. It could be, mechanics. It could be like physical. It could be a lot of different things, right? So it could be statistical. So like it could be stats. It could be physical or like mechanical, right? It could be mental maybe sometimes, like how are you feeling about this? It could be performance-based. There is a very wide variety of things that you could track, right? It could just be time-based. How long did you practice today? What did I say? I said time, physical, mental, statistical. There's another one. Like outcome-based, right? What were your outcomes? There's lots of different data that you can capture and that you can measure. But I think finding those 1 or 2 pieces of data that you know will be helpful for you. So for example, in our music example, I think technique and like mechanics is really helpful. Also in general, like another thing you can measure is like your intentionality or maybe your challenge. Like how much did you challenge yourself today? How intentional were you today? How do you feel about this? I think that kind of data can be more helpful than you think. Just like how did you feel about this practice session? Were you intentional? How intentional were you in this practice session? Just like rate it 1 out of 5 or something like that. Even if it's not objective data, you're talking about you here. So if it's subjective to other people, sure, but it's objective to you. I don't know if that makes sense. But like I said, there's lots of different data you can collect here, whether that's just how you're feeling or maybe what's actually true about like your mechanics or your stats or whatever. Track your progress. One thing about tracking your progress that I think is great is that you can make it into a game, right? Your progress could be a game that you just made up. So like, for example, with my drumming, maybe my game is like, okay, how long can I go doing this thing, right? And maybe the first day it's 30 seconds, and then you're trying to improve upon that to 45 seconds, then a minute. Or maybe how fast can I do this thing, right? Making it into a game, trying to beat your previous score from the previous day. I think that is a great thing about tracking your progress, gamifying it. So having your own specific stats, maybe not like a conventional stat, but just a stat like for gamifying this progress, tracking your progress in that way so you can see how you're going, what you need to improve on, and just continue this cycle, right? I never mentioned this, but this is a cycle, right? This goes back up here, right? Once we execute, next time we go back and evaluate again, right? It's a cycle. So all of this, tracking your progress really, really helps with this process, right? One of the best ways, one of the greatest ways that has reformed my consistency with things that I'm trying to succeed at in life is scheduling. And I used to think that scheduling was like, but then once I started doing it, it just reformed my consistency so much. Putting it in the calendar, like when are you going to practice this? When are you going to focus on this? And just blocking out time every day or every week or however often you want to do this, right? Your routine, your system. When you do this process, when you do this routine, when are you doing that in what days? So for me, like, within, like, let's say working out, I have scheduled every day at 4 p.m. I work out. And that has insanely helped my consistency with working out. It's crazy. So yeah, I do think that scheduling is just so helpful for your consistency, and it's probably more helpful than you think. So put it in the calendar. Make a routine. Every day at 8 p.m. I'm going to read. Every day at 6 p.m. every day after dinner I'm going to focus on my drumming. Things like that, right? This doesn't just apply to this process, this whole like succeeding at things. This could just be random habits, right? In our analogy of of driving, this is the driving part. Right? We have our engine, which is our why. We have our destination, which is our what. This is where we actually drive, right? We're pushing the gas pedal. We're pushing the brake pedal, whatever. Speaking of pushing gas and brake, right? 2 things I want to mention. First of all, you need rest, right? You need rest. We're going to put this over here. You have to be able to turn off the switch. You can't always be thinking about it. Can't always be stressing about it, because that's just going to make this whole process worse. Right? If it's like a goal that you really enjoy, then it should be fun and it should be enjoyable, right? You don't want to work so much on it, then it gets really stressful and you get really like tensed up when you think about it and it's like really stressful for you. You don't want that. You need rest. You need to be able to unplug from it. So I think like if you schedule your routine, you have your why, your what, and your how, you schedule your routine every single day. Once you're done with that routine, maybe you plan for the next day, but like you don't need to be thinking about it afterwards. If you just did what you planned to do, then that should be a win for the day and you should take a rest. And also just generally like take rest days. You don't need to be working on it every single day. It could just be like once or twice a week, right? As long as you are consistent and perseverant. You don't want to skip. You don't want to take unintentional rest days, right? You want intentional rest days. Within both of these, right? You want intentional work and you want intentional rest. The very last thing that I want to say about trying to succeed, trying to be good at things, is that there will be ups and downs, right? There will be hills and valleys within your driving journey, right? So you just have to be perseverant, right? You have to understand what's going on. You have to try to attack those problems when you encounter them, take breaks, rest when needed, right? It will be ups and downs, but what you are striving for is a net positive, right? This is what if our graph looks like this, right? We're striving for this net positive of improvement and trying to achieve certain things, right? So that's what I have to say for today. Hopefully this was helpful for you. This is an ultimate guide on just trying to be good at something, trying to succeed at something, trying to figure out trying to figure out our engine, our destination, and our whole driving process through the hills and valleys, through the successes and failures. Actually, before we end, I want to say that you will fail, right? And you want to be perseverant through that, but also you will succeed. But you want to make sure that you don't, like, just because you succeed doesn't mean you stop, right? I heard a quote, you succeeded, good, now get back up and keep working. You failed, good, now get back up and keep working. You don't want to invest in the highs and the lows. Just keep your mindset the same of just improvement. Yes, you obviously want to celebrate, but you don't want to like constantly be riding those waves, because if you get too high, then you're going to stop working. If you get too low, you're going to stop working. You just need to keep working, keep improving. And then lastly, what I want to say about failures is that a failure is a perfect opportunity to evaluate. A failure just shows you what you're bad at. A failure is an evaluation. So you want to take those failures and look at, okay, I was bad at this thing, so let's try to improve that now. The last thing I want to say is that this is probably stuff that you already know, right? This is pretty, if you've watched any kind of like get your life together videos or like achieving certain goals videos, like you probably know a lot of these things. But if you're watching this video, I would just like to challenge you, like, why haven't you applied it? If you knew all of this, but you're still watching this video, you still haven't applied it. Like, why haven't you applied this yet? Right? It's very simple. It's not easy, but it's very simple. So I would just urge you, like, let this be the last video that you watch on this topic, right? Because you know what you need to do now. You're held responsible for what you know. So if you know this already, why haven't you applied it yet? Just apply it, bro. It's not easy, but it's very simple. I guess if you really want to just take a next step after this video, figure out your why. What is your destination in the macro and the micro? Like, what are your big goals and what are your small goals? And honestly, most importantly, I think this step is the most important. If you had to take away one thing, like one step from this, it would be this how section. Build your plan. Build your routine where you can evaluate, plan, and execute intentionally so that you can ultimately get that net positive. So, yeah, I would just like to challenge you. Why haven't you applied this yet? If you know all of this, why haven't you applied it? Please just apply this now. Let this be the last video that you need to watch on this. But yeah, that is what I have to say today. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. If it was, and I would love a like and a comment. Definitely subscribe if you want to see more videos about goals, improvement, Christianity, life. Honestly, I'm just learning about life and trying to share what I'm learning. So if you want to see those videos, then definitely subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below, what is this thing you're trying to be good at? If you're watching this video, you're trying to succeed at something. What is this thing you're trying to succeed at? Let me know in the comments down below. Encourage each other. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye.